The rain had not stopped for 3 days. It fell in steady sheets across the iron gates of the Aldridge estate, each drop bursting against the gold crest of a family Theo had never met, but somehow remembered. The boy, no older than 11, stood barefoot on the wet cobblestone drive, clutching a sketchbook wrapped in newspaper. He raised a trembling hand and knocked. The sound was small against the storm, but it carried. When the door finally opened, a woman in a crisp uniform appeared. Her name tag read Elena. She was the kind of person who spoke softly to flowers when no one was watching, but tonight her voice caught as she saw the boy. "Can I help you, dear?" Theo held out the drawing with both hands. "I'm looking for the man with the silver watch." Elena's gaze dropped to the paper, and the breath left her body. It was a portrait. The eyes, the smile, the hair pinned just so. There was no mistaking it. It was her, the lady who had once filled these halls with laughter before her death a decade ago. Elena pressed a hand to her chest. Who told you to come here?" The boy blinked through the rain. "My mother, before the fire." And in that instant, the mansion that had been silent for years seemed to exhale. Theo Ramos had lived many lives in his 11 years, though none were long enough to call home. He remembered colors, smells, and the curve of smiles more than places. His earliest memory was of ash falling like snow, his mother's hand on his cheek, her voice whispering over the roar of fire. "Find the man with the silver watch. He'll help you." He woke days later in a shelter near the river, his small hand bandaged, his mother gone. From then on, he survived on curiosity and kindness. He was heartbreakingly polite, the kind of child who always said thank you, even when he was hungry, even when people turned him away. He learned to draw faces to quiet the noise in his head. The first portrait was of his mother, drawn on the back of a menu with a stub of charcoal. Then came others, the faces that drifted through the city. Street vendors, a bus driver with tired eyes, a girl who laughed at pigeons in the park. People began to notice. "You're gifted," one woman said, slipping a coin into his palm. "You draw souls, not faces." But Theo never understood what she meant. He only knew that every sketch brought him closer to remembering. Every few days he would wander through different neighborhoods, his sketchbook pressed to his chest. He searched for silver watches. Most belonged to hurried businessmen or old men on benches who shook their heads when he asked, "Do you know my mother?" And yet there was one memory that would not fade. A tall man with kind eyes and a shining watch on his wrist, leaning over him as smoke swirled. "It's all right, son. Hold on to her hand." That flash had lived in his mind ever since. Now, standing in front of the Aldridge mansion, Theo felt something shift. The air smelled like lilacs, faint and familiar. Elena, the maid, ushered him inside before the rain swallowed him whole. "You're soaked through. Sit here by the fire." Her voice trembled, though she tried to hide it. She glanced again at the drawing, at the unmistakable likeness of Mrs. Aldridge, her late employer. Theo warmed his hands near the flames, eyes wide as he took in the room. It was like stepping into one of his sketches, grand but lonely. A staircase spiraled upward like a memory frozen in time. Photographs lined the walls. A man with silver at his temples, a woman with gentle eyes, and between them, a younger boy, smiling, carefree. Elena's eyes softened as she caught him staring. "That's Mr. Aldridge and his wife, Marion. She passed away many years ago. You couldn't have known her." Theo hesitated. "I remember her face. I drew it before I came here." "Do you know Mr. Aldridge?" He shook his head. "Only the watch. My mother said he would help me." For a moment, the only sound was the ticking of the mantel clock. Then Elena rose. "Stay here. I'll call him." Upstairs, in a study that smelled of old leather and loneliness, Daniel Aldridge sat behind a wide mahogany desk.
A single lamp burned beside a half-finished letter to a foundation that no longer needed his money. Since Marion's death, his world had shrunk to charity ledgers and silence. He wore her wedding ring on a chain beneath his shirt, and her memory like armor. When Elena entered, her voice was barely a whisper. "Sir, there's a boy at the door. Says he's looking for you." Daniel didn't look up. "Tell the gate to send him to the shelter. We already make monthly donations." "It's not that kind of boy," she said gently. He had this." She handed him the drawing. The pencil lines were so delicate they almost breathed. Daniel's eyes fixed on the curve of the lips, the spark of life caught between strokes. His pulse stuttered. "Where did he get this?" "He says his mother sent him, before a fire." For the first time in years, Daniel stood. "Bring him here." Theo stood when Daniel entered, instinctively clutching his sketchbook like a shield. The man's presence filled the room, tall, tired, but gentle-eyed. The watch gleamed on his wrist, silver. Daniel stopped short. The boy looked up at him, eyes wide but steady. "You're the man with the silver watch." Daniel frowned. "How do you know that?" "My mother told me to find you." "Who is your mother?" Theo hesitated. I don't remember her name." Something in Daniel softened, though his confusion deepened. "You drew this?" Theo nodded. "I draw faces I remember. Yours too, I think. But it's blurry." Daniel's gaze drifted to the child's thin frame, the patched clothes, the soaked shoes. He felt a pang he hadn't known he could still feel. "You must be hungry." Theo shook his head quickly. "I had bread this morning." "Yesterday morning?" Daniel exhaled and signaled to Elena. "Bring something warm." Then, turning to Theo, "You said your mother told you to find me. Did she say why?" "She said you help people." Theo's voice was so sincere it ached. "And that you knew her once." Daniel sat heavily in his chair. "How could I? I would remember." Theo reached into his sketchbook, flipping past dozens of pages, faces of strangers, kind and cruel, until he found a charcoal portrait of a young woman with dark eyes and a smile that tilted slightly to the left. "This is her," he said softly. Daniel froze. It was Marion, but younger, and not drawn from a photo. It was her, alive, laughing in the garden the summer before their son died. His throat tightened. "How did you learn to draw like that?" "My mom. She said faces are stories." Elena returned with a tray, her hands trembling. "Sir, this boy could be from anywhere, but look at him! The eyes! Doesn't he—" Daniel didn't answer. He simply watched Theo eat, each bite cautious, polite. When Theo looked up again, crumbs at the corner of his mouth, he whispered, "Did you know her too?" Daniel's reply came slowly. "I did. A long time ago." Theo smiled faintly, and for a moment something like warmth returned to the room. But upstairs, beyond the walls of memory, a door creaked open in the corridor, a draft carrying the faint scent of lilacs, Marion's perfume. And though no one spoke of it, each of them felt it. Something had just begun to stir in the house that grief built.
Since Marion's death, his world had shrunk to charity ledgers and silence. He wore her wedding ring on a chain beneath his shirt, and her memory like armor. When Elena entered, her voice was barely a whisper. "Sir, there's a boy at the door. Says he's looking for you." Daniel didn't look up. "Tell the gate to send him to the shelter. We already make monthly donations." "It's not that kind of boy," Elena said gently. He had this." She handed him the drawing. The pencil lines were so delicate, they almost breathed. Daniel's eyes fixed on the curve of the lips, the spark of life caught between strokes. His pulse stuttered. "Where did he get this?" "He says his mother sent him, before a fire." For the first time in years, Daniel stood. "Bring him here."
Theo stood when Daniel entered, instinctively clutching his sketchbook like a shield. The man's presence filled the room, tall, tired, but gentle-eyed. The watch gleamed on his wrist, silver. Daniel stopped short. The boy looked up at him, eyes wide, but steady. "You're the man with the silver watch." Daniel frowned. "How do you know that?" "My mother told me to find you." "Who is your mother?" Theo hesitated. I don't remember her name." Something in Daniel softened, though his confusion deepened. "You drew this?" Theo nodded. "I draw faces I remember. Yours too, I think. But it's blurry." Daniel's gaze drifted to the child's thin frame, the patched clothes, the soaked shoes. He felt a pang he hadn't known he could still feel. "You must be hungry." Theo shook his head quickly. "I had bread this morning." "When?" "Yesterday morning." Daniel exhaled and signaled to Elena, "Bring something warm." Then turning to Theo, "You said your mother told you to find me. Did she say why?" "She said you help people." Theo's voice was so sincere it ached. "And that you knew her once." Daniel sat heavily in his chair. "How could I? I would remember." Theo reached into his sketchbook, flipping past dozens of pages, faces of strangers, kind and cruel, until he found a charcoal portrait of a young woman with dark eyes and a smile that tilted slightly to the left. "This is her," he said softly. Daniel froze. It was Marion, but younger, and not drawn from a photo. It was her, alive, laughing in the garden the summer before their son died. His throat tightened. "How did you teach you to draw like that?" "My mom. She said faces are stories." Elena returned with a tray, her hands trembling. "Sir, this boy, he could be from anywhere. But look at him. The eyes. Doesn't he—" Daniel didn't answer. He simply watched Theo eat, each bite cautious, polite. When Theo looked up again, crumbs at the corner of his mouth, he whispered, "Did you know her too?" Daniel's reply came slowly. "I did. A long time ago." Theo smiled faintly, and for a moment something like warmth returned to the room. But upstairs, beyond the walls of memory, a door creaked open in the corridor, a draft carrying the faint scent of lilacs, Marion's perfume. And though no one spoke of it, each of them felt it. Something had just begun to stir in the house that grief built.
The rain had passed by morning, but the world outside still smelled of it. Wet earth, cold air, and the faint sweetness of lilacs drifting from the garden. Theo woke wrapped in a blanket too soft to be real, curled on a velvet chaise by the parlor fire. For a few blissful seconds, he forgot he was a boy who belonged nowhere. Then the memory of his dream returned, a hand, feminine, familiar, reaching out to him through smoke. The silver watch glinted on her wrist. He sat up with a start, his sketchbook open beside him. One new page lay there, smudged in charcoal. That same hand, that same glint of metal. But he hadn't drawn it. "Elena?" His voice came small, uncertain. The maid appeared in the doorway carrying a folded towel and a cup of cocoa. "You're awake, querido? You look so peaceful I didn't want to wake you." Theo pointed to the sketchbook. "Did you draw that?" She blinked. "No, dear, I can't draw a straight line." Theo frowned, closing the book carefully. "Then maybe she did." Elena's brow creased. "She?" "The lady from my dream, the one who wore the watch." Elena set the cup down and tried to smile, though her voice trembled. "Dreams are funny things. They borrow pieces of our hearts." But Theo only whispered, "What if they're memories?" By mid-morning, the mansion had begun to wake from its long sleep. Daniel Aldridge was already pacing his study, phone pressed to his ear.
His voice, usually calm, was edged with disbelief. "You're certain? No records under that name?" "Yes, sir," came the voice of his assistant from the other end. "No birth certificate, no school enrollment, no known address linked to any Theo Ramos." Daniel rubbed his bridge of the nose. "And the fire?" "There was one 12 years ago, near the East Wharf district. Multiple fatalities. The files are sealed under family court protection." He hung up slowly, his mind full of questions that had no shape. How had the boy drawn Marion's face? Why had his mother sent him here? When he stepped out of his study, the house felt different, warmer. He found Elena in the breakfast room arranging fruit as Theo perched at the window, sketching something with fierce concentration. "What are you drawing?" Daniel asked. Theo turned the book around. It was the garden, each tree, each petal rendered in perfect miniature. "It's like the one in my dream," he said softly. "But there was a woman standing here." He pointed to a spot by the fountain. "She looked happy." Daniel followed his finger. That was where Marion used to sit every afternoon, reading to their son. "Perhaps you should see it for yourself," Daniel said gently. "The garden's just beyond those doors." Theo hesitated, then nodded. Outside, the air was crisp, the grass heavy with dew. Theo's bare feet sank into it, and he laughed, a sound that made Daniel's chest ache in a way he couldn't name. "Careful near the fountain," Daniel warned, trailing behind. But Theo had already crouched by the marble edge, eyes wide at the fish gliding beneath the water surface. He touched the stone, tracing initials carved faintly along its side. M+D. "Is that you and her?" Theo asked. Daniel paused. "Yes. Marion and I built this fountain when we bought the house. She said every home needs something that sings, even when no one's around." Theo smiled faintly. "Maybe that's why I heard it in my dream." They wandered through the garden in companionable silence. For every plant Theo pointed to, Daniel found himself remembering its story. The white roses Marion had loved, the magnolia tree planted the year their son was born. "You have a good eye," Daniel said. "Do you always remember places this clearly?" "Not places, just faces, and sometimes things that belong to them." Daniel's heart tightened. "Then perhaps this house belonged to someone you loved." Theo looked up at him, confusion flickering across his face. "Maybe." By afternoon, the housekeeper had prepared a room for Theo, a small guest suite at the end of the east wing. The sheets smelled faintly of lavender, and sunlight pooled across the hardwood floor. It was more than Theo had ever had. Elena helped him unpack his meager belongings: one sketchbook, 3 pencils, and a faded photograph of a woman whose face had nearly vanished with time. "Is this your mother?" she asked softly. Theo nodded. "It's the only picture that didn't burn." Elena traced the blurred outline of the woman's hair, her throat tightening. "She looks kind." She was. She always said, "Kindness is the only thing that doesn't get lost." Elena turned away quickly, pretending to adjust the curtains. "You rest, querido. Dinner will be ready soon." When she left, Theo sat cross-legged on the bed, staring at the photograph until his vision blurred. Somewhere deep in the walls, a clock chimed the hour, and with it came a faint sound, like footsteps in the hall, slow, deliberate. He rose and opened the door, peering into the corridor. Empty.
Still, he followed the sound, past the portraits, past the grand staircase to a door slightly ajar. Inside was a room filled with music boxes, dozens of them, each one silent. On the far table sat a small jewelry box with a cracked lid.
Theo opened it. Inside was a woman's silver watch, its face still gleaming beneath a film of dust. His heart pounded. The watch! Behind him, Daniel's voice startled him. "What are you doing in here?" Theo spun around, eyes wide. I heard something. I didn't mean to." Daniel stepped forward, gaze falling on the watch. His face softened. "That belonged to Marion. It stopped the day she died." Theo's fingers trembled as he handed it over. "I saw it in my dream." Daniel hesitated before taking it. "Dreams can play tricks on us, Theo." "But what if they're trying to tell us something?" the boy asked. For a long moment, Daniel said nothing. Then he knelt, looking the boy in the eye. "What do you think they're telling you?" Theo's voice dropped to a whisper. "That she wants me to find something." That night, after Theo was asleep, Daniel sat in his study again, the watch ticking faintly on the desk beside him. He hadn't wound it in years, yet somehow it had begun to move again, each click echoing through the still house. He opened his wife's old journal, its pages yellowed and delicate. Halfway through, he found a note dated 2 weeks before the fire in East Wharf. "Met with Clara Ramos today. She's struggling but proud. Reminds me of who I was before Daniel's name meant anything. Promised to sponsor her art program once the foundation expands. Her little boy, Theo, has the most extraordinary gift. He remembers people as if he's met them before." Daniel's hand froze. Clara Ramos. The mother. He pushed back his chair and stared at the wall, the truth dawning like dawn breaking through smoke. Marion had known them. She had tried to help. He looked toward the door that led to the east wing. The boy sleeping there wasn't just a stranger. He was the last echo of his wife's unfinished kindness. Down the hall, Theo stirred in his sleep. He dreamed again of fire and water, of his mother's voice calling his name through smoke. But this time, another figure appeared beside her, a woman in white, smiling softly. She touched his shoulder and said, "You're almost home, Theo. Tell him what was lost." Theo woke gasping, moonlight pouring across his sheets. His sketchbook lay open on the nightstand. Another drawing added in his sleep. This one showed a key, small and ornate, resting beside the silver watch. He turned toward the hallway. The mansion was silent, but the faintest scent of lilac drifted through the air.
The morning broke with pale light spreading through the mist. Theo was already awake before the sun touched the windows, his shoes untied and his sketchbook under one arm. Something had pulled him from sleep, the scent of lilacs again, gentle and impossible to ignore. He followed it barefoot down the grand staircase, past the ticking clock and the sleeping hush of the mansion. When he stepped outside, the garden glowed faintly with dew. The air was cool and wet against his skin, but it carried that same fragrance, sweet, familiar, almost like a whisper guiding him. He moved toward the fountain. The water shimmered like glass, catching the early light. And there, resting on the marble lip where the initials M and D had been carved, lay a single silver key. Theo froze. It was small, ornate, and shaped like a flower at the bow. He reached out slowly, half afraid it would vanish when he touched it. The metal was warm, not cold. He turned it over in his hand, tracing the engraving along its stem. To open what love leaves behind. Behind him, a voice startled him. "Theo, what are you doing out here so early?" It was Daniel, coat hastily thrown over his pajamas. His hair was disheveled, his expression wary. Theo held up the key. "I found this." Daniel stepped closer, brow furrowing. "That was Marion's. She kept it on her necklace. He stopped short, remembering.
I buried it with her. Theo's voice came soft. Then maybe she wanted it found. The words made Daniel's breath catch. He knelt, taking the key carefully. Where exactly was it? Right here, Theo said, pointing to the carved initials, like it was waiting. For a moment, neither spoke. The sound of the fountain filled the silence, soft, steady, eternal. Daniel looked at the key again, its silver catching the light. There's a box, he said finally. Marion kept a small chest locked in her studio. I never opened it after she died. Maybe... No, that's impossible. Theo tilted his head. Maybe not. They returned inside, the mansion still half asleep around them. Elena met them in the corridor, holding a tray of breakfast she nearly dropped when she saw Daniel carrying the key. Senor, where did you... The garden, Daniel said shortly. By the fountain. Elena crossed herself. Madre de Dios. She told me once, if anything happens, tell Daniel the garden will remember. I thought she meant the roses. Theo's eyes widened. The garden did remember. Elena stared at him, unable to find her words. Daniel placed a steady hand on Theo's shoulder. Show me where you found that drawing, the one of the hand and the watch. Theo led him upstairs to the parlor, where he'd first slept. The sketchbook still rested on the small table, the charcoal image dark and clear, the hand reaching, the watch gleaming, and now that Daniel looked closer, the faint outline of a key drawn beside it. He felt a chill crawl up his neck. This wasn't here before. Theo looked up. I didn't draw it. Daniel exhaled. Then we'll see what it means. The studio door creaked open for the first time in a decade. Dust motes drifted like snow through a beam of light from the high window. The room smelled of paint and lilacs, the last scent Marion had worn. Her canvases still leaned against the walls, unfinished landscapes, portraits, and one half-painted scene of the river under moonlight. Theo ran his fingers over the edge of a paintbrush jar. It feels like she's still here. Daniel swallowed hard. She used to paint before breakfast every morning, said it was her prayer. At the far end of the studio, under a cloth, sat a small chest bound with ribbon. The lock was intricate, delicate, and shaped to match the key. Theo handed it over without a word. Daniel hesitated, then pressed the key into the lock. It turned smoothly, almost eagerly. The lid opened with a soft sigh. Inside lay a bundle of letters tied with blue ribbon, and atop them a folded envelope bearing Daniel's name. His fingers trembled as he opened it. My dearest Daniel, if you're reading this, then something in me has seen what you could not. I met a woman named Theo Ramos through the foundation. She's raising a boy with a gift I can't explain. He remembers faces the way I remember colors. I see something in him, a light that doesn't dim even in loss. If anything ever happens to me, promise me you'll look after him. The world forgets kindness too easily. Don't let this child be forgotten. Love always, Marion. Daniel's eyes blurred. His hands trembled, the paper shaking between them. Theo stood still, watching him, unsure if he should speak. She knew my mother, Theo said quietly. Daniel nodded, voice hoarse. She did, and she wanted me to find you. Elena, who had been standing silently by the door, wiped her eyes with her apron. Senor, this is fate. The boy's mother, your wife, they were linked by something holy. Daniel looked down at the child, this thin, polite, brave boy who had walked out of the rain carrying a face from his past, and felt something unfurl in his chest, not just grief, but the faint stirrings of purpose. Then you're home now, at least until we find out more. Theo's gaze dropped to the floor. Home, he repeated, as if testing the word. Days turned into a gentle rhythm. Theo followed Elena through the house, learning its rooms and corners. He swept leaves from the garden, helped polish the silver, and spent hours sketching in the library while Daniel worked nearby. Every night before bed he drew something new, objects or faces he couldn't remember ever seeing, a door, a tree, a little boy with a dimpled smile. When Daniel saw that last one, his heart stopped. "That's my son," he whispered. "I died in the same accident as Marion." Theo looked confused. "I saw him in my dream. He said he missed the stories you used to tell." Daniel's breath caught. "What stories?" "The ones about the river that remembers," he said simply. Daniel's hand went to his mouth. That's impossible." But when Theo smiled, Daniel couldn't help but smile too. The child's gentleness felt like sunlight returning to a room long shut. One afternoon, while Daniel met with lawyers to reopen the Ramos fire case, Theo wandered through the attic. Dust covered everything, like snowfall. Among the boxes, he found a broken music box shaped like a house. When he wound it, the tune faltered, but still played, a lullaby he half remembered. The lid popped open to reveal a photograph tucked inside. Marion, Daniel, their son, and beside them, a young woman holding a toddler. Theo's heart raced. That woman was his mother. He rushed downstairs, the music box clutched to his chest. "Mr. Aldrich!" Daniel looked up from his desk. "What is it?" Theo placed the photo in front of him. "That's her, my mom. She was here." Daniel stared at the picture. "My God. I remember the day, the charity picnic, the laughter, the way Marion had pulled Clara Ramos into our family portrait. You were here, Theo. You were just a baby." Theo looked down at the image again. "Then maybe I didn't lose everything." Daniel swallowed hard. "No, son, you didn't." The word son hung in the air, heavy with meaning neither of them dared name yet. That evening, the three of them, Daniel, Elena, and Theo, sat in the garden as the sun sank behind the trees. The lilacs swayed gently in the breeze, their scent thick and forgiving. "Do you think she can see us?" Theo asked quietly. Daniel followed his gaze toward the fountain. "I'd like to think so." Theo's sketchbook rested on his knees. He turned to a fresh page and began to draw the garden, but his hand moved as if guided by another. When he finished, the image showed not 3 figures, but 4. Marion stood behind them, smiling. Elena saw it and crossed herself again, tears spilling freely this time. "She's telling us she's proud." Daniel placed a hand on Theo's shoulder. "We'll honor her by finishing what she started." Theo smiled softly. "How?" Daniel looked toward the horizon. "By rebuilding what was lost." That night, long after everyone had gone to bed, the watch on Daniel's desk began to tick faster, its rhythm steady and alive. Beside it lay the key, glinting in moonlight. The house no longer felt haunted. It felt awake. In the east wing, Theo dreamed again. The woman in white stood by the fountain, her voice soft as wind through leaves. "You've done well, my boy, but the truth isn't finished yet." When Theo woke, the sketchbook beside him had another drawing of a building he didn't recognize. Above its door, faint letters read, "Ramos Family Trust, Community Center."
The following morning arrived bright and cold. Sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the Aldrich mansion, dust dancing in its beams. Daniel was standing by the window in his study, the silver watch ticking faintly on his desk. Theo sat opposite him, sketchbook open to the page from last night, the drawing of a worn brick building with faded lettering, "Ramos Family Trust, Community Center." Daniel traced the outline with his finger. "You're sure you've never seen this place?" Theo shook his head. "Not in real life, only in my dream." Elena, hovering nearby with a tray of tea, leaned forward. "Señor, that name, Ramos, like the boy's mother, maybe it's connected." Daniel nodded slowly. "It has to be. Marion and Clara were working on an art outreach program for children before the fire, but it was never completed. The land deed is still in her name." Theo's eyes widened. "So, it's real?" Daniel gave a small, thoughtful smile. "Yes, it's real. And if the boy who dreams of keys and watches draws a building that once belonged to his mother, then I think we need to see it for ourselves."
The drive into the city took an hour. The traffic was noisy, the streets crowded with early commuters. Theo pressed his face to the car window, watching the city roll past. Markets, narrow alleys, and graffiti that looked like secret messages to him. When they turned down a forgotten side street, Daniel slowed the car. The building stood at the corner, exactly as Theo had drawn it. Its red bricks were weathered and cracked, ivy creeping up its sides. The sign above the entrance was nearly illegible, but the words Ramos Family Trust still shone faintly beneath the grime. Theo's breath hitched. "I've been here," he murmured. I used to play by those steps." Daniel parked and got out. The door to the center hung crooked on its hinges. Inside, dust coated everything like time itself had given up on cleaning. Elena gasped softly when she entered behind them. "It smells of paint and paper." Theo wandered toward the wall, his fingers brushing faded murals, bright faces, suns, and flowers painted by children long ago. "She used to paint with them," he said suddenly, his voice certain. "My mom, she said color makes you brave." Daniel turned, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "Clara's art program." He pointed to a signboard half buried under plaster. "Community Art for All, sponsored by Marion and Daniel Alderidge Foundation." Theo knelt and lifted it gently. "You helped her." Daniel's throat tightened. "It seems she helped me too, more than I knew." They explored the building slowly, their footsteps echoing in the emptiness. In one room they found a wall of children's handprints, each labeled in bright paint. Most names had faded, but near the corner, Daniel saw one still visible. Theo R., written in small, careful letters. Theo reached out and pressed his hand against the faded print. It fit perfectly. "She brought me here when I was little," he said softly. "I remember now. She said one day we'd come back when the walls could sing again." Daniel felt the ache in his chest deepen. "Then let's make them sing again." In what had once been an office, they found a locked metal cabinet. Daniel frowned, tugging at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Theo's gaze drifted to his sketchbook, the page with the silver key. He looked down at the actual key hanging now from Daniel's watch pocket chain. "Maybe it opens this too," he whispered. Daniel hesitated. "That key belonged to Marion. You think?" Theo nodded. "She wanted us to find something." The lock clicked open as if waiting for their touch. Inside lay stacks of folders, each labeled Donor Records 2013 to 2014. Beneath them, wrapped in brown paper, was a small wooden box identical to the one they'd found in Marion's studio. Daniel lifted it carefully. Inside was a flash drive and a folded letter. "To whoever finds this, if you're reading it, the truth may be too late for us. The property was meant to be cleared for redevelopment, and someone wanted the project silenced. If this reaches Daniel, tell him to finish what we started. The children deserve their place. Clara Ramos." Elena gasped. She knew someone tried to stop her. Daniel's hand shook, and Marion was helping her. That's why they met near the East Wharf that night. Theo looked between them, his voice small. "So, the fire?" Daniel nodded gravely. "It was set to destroy their work." Theo bit his lip. "Then she died because she wanted to help people?" Daniel knelt beside him. "Yes, because she believed kindness could outlast cruelty." Theo swallowed hard, tears shining but unfallen. "Then we have to finish it." Daniel's eyes softened. "We will, I promise." They returned to the mansion before dusk, the box and letters carried like fragile treasure. In the study, Daniel plugged the flash drive into his laptop. A folder opened, hundreds of scanned files, letters, and plans for the art center. Among them, a video file titled For Daniel. He clicked play. The screen flickered to life, showing Marion seated in her studio, paint on her hands and sunlight streaming behind her. She smiled, that same half-tilted smile Theo had drawn from memory. "If you're watching this," she began, her voice calm, "then I didn't make it. But that's all right, Daniel. You always said some stories only end when someone finds the courage to tell them. So tell this one. For Clara, for the children, for Theo." Theo stepped closer, mesmerized. "He's special," Marion continued. "He sees people the way I do, with his heart first. Don't let the world make him forget that. You'll know what to do when the watch starts ticking again." The screen went black. Silence filled the room. The watch on Daniel's wrist ticked steadily, louder now than ever. Elena covered her mouth, whispering, "She knew you would find him." Theo's eyes shone. "She said my name." Daniel reached out and pulled the boy into a quiet, steady embrace. "You're safe now, Theo. We'll carry her promise together." That night the mansion felt alive. Lights grew in rooms long dark. Elena hummed softly as she cooked. Daniel sat by the fire, sorting the recovered plans with renewed purpose. Theo drew beside him, sketching the center reborn, bright walls, smiling children, and a banner that read, "The Marion and Clara Art Haven." He held it up shyly. "Do you think we could really build it again?" Daniel studied the drawing. "Yes," he said, "and we will. It's what they wanted." Theo smiled, eyes glinting. "Then maybe they'll stop visiting my dreams." Daniel chuckled softly. "Or maybe they'll just start smiling more." Later that evening, Daniel stepped outside to the garden, the silver key still in his pocket. The fountain whispered quietly under the starlight. He thought of Marion's laughter, of Clara's determination, and of the boy sleeping upstairs, the living thread between both women's hearts. He looked toward the sky. "You were right, Marion," he said softly. "Kindness doesn't get lost." A soft breeze stirred the lilacs, carrying a scent that lingered like an answer. Inside, Theo stirred in his bed. The last thing he saw before sleep took him was the sketchbook glowing faintly under moonlight, the newest page, blank, waiting for the next part of their story.
6 months later, the city woke to spring. The old Ramos Family Trust Community Center, once abandoned, soot-stained and forgotten, now gleamed beneath fresh paint and banners that fluttered in the breeze. Children's laughter echoed through the courtyard. The mural on the main wall shone with new life, bright colors, open faces, and at the center, 2 women standing side by side, Marion Aldridge and Clara Ramos. Theo stood near the entrance, his sketchbook tucked under one arm. He wore clean clothes for the first time in years, the sleeves slightly too long, and his hair combed carefully by Elena that morning. Beside him, Daniel adjusted his tie, looking both proud and nervous. "It's strange," Daniel murmured. "This place used to be full of ghosts." Theo smiled softly. "Now it's full of people again. Maybe that's what the ghosts wanted." Elena, bustling between tables of donated art supplies, overheard them. "Hi, listen to this boy, already wiser than all of us." Theo blushed and looked away, watching as families began to arrive, neighbors, teachers, volunteers. News cameras clustered near the steps. Daniel had insisted that the reopening be public, not to honor him, but to honor the women whose kindness had sparked it all. The silver watch gleamed on his wrist, freshly polished, ticking in rhythm with the buzz of new beginnings. When the mayor arrived, speeches followed. Words like legacy, hope, and rebirth hung in the warm air. But Daniel's voice, when it was his turn, cut through the ceremony with quiet sincerity. This building is not just brick and paint, it is the echo of 2 women who believed that love is louder than loss. Marion Aldridge and Clara Ramos built something that refused to burn.
Applause swelled. Theo's throat tightened. When the ribbon was finally cut, the doors opened to reveal the rebuilt interior, sunlight flooding through skylights, walls lined with children's paintings. In the center of the lobby hung a framed drawing, Theo's sketch of the garden fountain, initials M+D, and beneath them a small inscription in his neat handwriting, "For those who remember faces when names fade." Daniel placed a hand on his shoulder. "Your mother would be proud." Theo looked up, eyes glinting. "Then maybe we can finally rest." But as the celebration unfolded, a figure lingered at the edge of the crowd, an older man in a worn coat, a limp in his step, a thin scar running along his jaw. He watched Theo and Daniel with an expression that flickered between longing and guilt. Yelena noticed first. "Senor Aldridge, that man by the fence. He's been watching since we arrived." Daniel turned, frowning. "I don't recognize him." The man hesitated, then began to walk forward, his hands trembling. When he reached them, he removed his hat. "Mr. Aldridge?" His voice rasped like gravel. "Yes?" The man swallowed hard. "My name's Henry Goss. I worked security for the redevelopment company 12 years ago, the night of the fire." Daniel's face darkened. "The fire that killed my wife and Mrs. Ramos?" Henry nodded slowly. "I didn't set it, but I knew who did. The company wanted the land cleared for high-end apartments. I was paid to keep quiet. But when I saw the news, when I saw what was lost," his eyes flicked toward Theo, "I couldn't sleep, not once. I didn't think anyone survived." Theo's voice came soft but steady. "My mom did, for a while. She saved me." Henry's gaze broke. "She carried you out herself. I saw her. She told me to run and find help, but I was a coward. I ran the other way." Daniel stepped forward, anger flashing. But it wasn't sharp, only sorrowful. "And now?" "I came to say sorry," Henry whispered, "and to tell you who ordered it. The man who owned the development firm, he died last year. No justice left to chase. But if there's anything I can give, it's this." He reached into his pocket and produced a small envelope, yellowed by time. Inside was a photo. Marion and Clara at the construction site, laughing, the new foundation stone behind them. On the back, scrawled in pen, were Marion's words, "Kindness builds what money can't." Henry's voice cracked. "They were good people. I don't deserve forgiveness, but the world does deserve them back." Theo looked at him for a long moment, then stepped forward. His small hand reached out. "You can help us paint tomorrow," he said simply. Henry blinked, stunned. "You'd let me?" Theo nodded. "Everyone can start over. That's what she used to say." Daniel swallowed hard, blinking back tears. "Then that's what we'll do." That evening, as the crowd thinned and the laughter faded into the hum of the city, Daniel and Theo stayed behind to lock up. The center glowed in the soft golden light of sunset, and for the first time, Daniel felt the deep peace that had eluded him for years. Theo wandered to the mural on the wall, tracing Marion's smile with his fingertips. "She's happy now." Daniel joined him. "Do you really think they see us?" Theo smiled faintly. "I don't think they ever stopped." He opened his sketchbook one last time and began to draw, not with sadness, but with quiet joy. He drew the center full of children, Daniel smiling beside them, and above them both, two women painted in the sky, watching. When he finished, he tore the page carefully and handed it to Daniel. "It belongs here." Daniel framed it that night. Weeks passed. The community center thrived. Children came from every corner of the city, some hungry, some lost, all curious. Theo taught them how to draw faces, not just shapes. He told them stories about seeing kindness in the small details, the curve of a smile, the way someone shares their lunch, the way light rests on an old man's hands. Yelena ran the kitchen, feeding everyone who arrived. Henry painted benches and fixed windows. Daniel oversaw classes but spent most of his time sitting quietly, watching the world heal itself. And Theo began to laugh again. One Sunday he stood by the garden fountain at the mansion, watching the water ripple. Daniel joined him, 2 cups of cocoa in hand. "You've grown," Daniel said, smiling. "You're taller than the fountain now." Theo grinned. "That means I can take care of it for you." Daniel looked down at the boy, the child who had walked out of the rain and into his life, and felt an ache, both tender and immense. "You already have." Theo hesitated, then asked softly, "Do you think my mom knows I'm okay?" Daniel set his cup down and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "I think she does. And I think Marion tells her stories about you every night." Theo's eyes filled, but he didn't cry. He simply nodded. "Then I'll keep drawing them both so nobody forgets." They stood there a long time, the fountain whispering between them, the lilacs swaying as if listening. That night Theo drew one last picture before bed, a simple scene of the mansion and the community center side by side, connected by a bridge of light. Underneath, he wrote in his careful hand, "Home is where kindness remembers." He set down his pencil, closed the book, and climbed into bed. Somewhere in the house the watch ticked softly. The key, resting beside it, glimmered faintly one last time before the room fell still. Epilogue. 1 year later. The community center walls truly sang again. Murals bloomed with color, laughter rolled through open windows. On the front gate a new plaque read, "The Marion and Clara Art Haven, for every child who remembers faces before names." Daniel often visited, now gray-haired but lighter in spirit. Theo, now 12, helped run the art workshops. When people asked how he came to live with Mr. Aldridge, he always smiled and said, "I knocked on the right door." Yelena told the story often, her eyes misting every time. She came in from the rain and left the sun behind for all of us. And every evening, as the lights dimmed and the last brushes were washed, Theo would stand by the mural of Marion and Clara, whispering a quiet thank you, because he remembered not just their faces, but their kindness, and that, he knew now, was the same thing.